filled out at all, or using incorrect clauses for certain items, or allowing certain incorrect clauses from other brokerages to kind of seep into our work. And while the technology is a great time saver and streamlines things for us, we're more open to challenges because everybody knows how the technology works and they know where the weak spots are. So having said that, you have to pay attention to details. You have to understand your forms and clauses, and you have to understand that these document the real estate process. That's what all the paperwork is about. And it documents how an agreement is reached between the parties, and that these agreements are actual contracts. They're legal contracts. When there's a problem, the first thing that happens is that other brokerages, other agents, RICO, TREB, lawyers, and the courts attack the details in our contracts. If the details aren't right, you don't have a binding contract. The documents have to be correct to protect yourselves and the clients. I'll give you just a little piece of advice, which I think is extremely important, and it's something to get into a good habit about. And that one is call the forms by their titles, not their numbers. You'll understand the use and you'll be able to find them more easily. If you can even think of one word in that title, it's easier to search than going through all the numbers looking for what the use of the form is and which one you're going to need. Another thing is we're professionals. We're supposed to know what we're doing, and we do for the most part. However, we can always use a little bit of extra practice. And I truly believe that to practice our real estate services properly, we should review on an ongoing basis. It's amazing how there are real clauses for almost any occasion and any purpose, but you have to know they're there for you to be able to find them. You have to understand their meaning and know when to use them. So review a few clauses at a time. Maybe take an hour every couple of weeks and go through 5 or 6 clauses and review them. And it's amazing what you'll find when you're sitting there looking through the clauses. I've put together this sort of session to point out the deficiencies that we see on a regular basis that cause problems that we are addressing on an ongoing basis. So here we go. What I've done is sort of put together the way you hand in an agreement of purchase and sale. Sorry, here we go. And sort of shown you what we see on an ongoing basis. The sales information sheet is there for a reason. It's not there to make your lives a misery. It is there for you to fill it out, and so that the administrators in the back end can double check the contract details. You need to fill out as much as possible. So the top of it you have to fill out. You fill out your side, whether you're working with the buyer or the seller. You fill out that portion of it. You fill out as much of the other side as you have information for. You fill out your own side. If you're the listing agent, then you put it in here, and you fill out the buyer, the cooperating agent's information from their business card, from the documents, wherever you can find it. You fill it out. Then moving down, you're filling out how much of the documentation you're handing in with the transaction. Things that are missing, you've got due dates here for, and it allows the administrators to set up a file, to set up a trade record, and to remind you when things are due. Down here at the bottom, Oftentimes, things are adjusted in, let's say you're splitting commission with another agent in the office, or it isn't exactly as it was in the listing documents, or you've made an adjustment in the confirmation of cooperation and representation. Just clarify it for the ladies. And even on something like this, if you don't know how to put it in there to be specific, put in there, I'm a little bit unsure. Let me contact you, Mandy, or whoever your administrator is. Let's talk about it. Or if you need me to clarify, give me a call. So you can put all of that. This is your sheet to just let the back end know exactly what's happening. Okay. Also, this is one of the things that we're finding more and more agents do not feel it is necessary to fill out. Let me tell you that it is necessary to fill out. It causes frustrations when it's not. And like with any of our other documents, we do not pay out until we have completed documents. That's to protect yourselves and the brokerage. Offer summary document. This one always gets filled out partially. And here, when you're taking a look at the offer summary document, it is also called Form 801. The top 1/3 of the page is what originally gets filled out when the buyer's agent submits an offer. Here you've got the information from which brokerage it's coming from, that there is a legitimate offer, and that goes along with the offer to the listing brokerage. The next part of it is down at the bottom. This is for the listing brokerage that receives the offer. They complete this. If they do a sign back to the buyer, this is supposed to go along with the sign back, and it is executed as signed back, counter offered. So then you, as the buyer brokerage, or whoever the buyer brokerage is, has it once more. And if the offer is declined, let's say you're in multiple offers, you send it along, and the listing brokerage declines your offer, it's nice if they send it back, but this form is there for the listing brokerage's use to prove they got an offer. So let's say the listing brokerage does do a sign back to the buyer. This form then goes back with the offer to the buyer, and this is where the buyer completes. If negotiations go on before, after that, then you need a second form. Okay? Feel free, though, that these forms are there for your use. You can make your notes on there as to what happened, what time, the amount of the offer, all of that you can put on there, because this is an information page for RICO, and to be able to follow it, you can certainly make your own notes on it. Next is the confirmation of cooperation and representation. All of our front desks have sort of an outline on how to fill these out if it's something a little bit out of the ordinary. Again, if it's a little bit out of the ordinary, please, please, please go to your manager and ask how to fill it out. Oftentimes what we see here is the confirmation of cooperation and representation does not necessarily reflect the actual representation that is there. And when we are challenged on anything, this is one of the places that RICO especially takes a look at to see that we understand how we are representing clients. So in here, if we're the listing brokerage, it says that, and it says whether or not you are representing the seller as a customer, or that the listing brokerage, how you are treating the buyer here. Okay, So as the listing brokerage, we are absolutely representing the seller, but this is what we're offering to the buyer. Either yes or no, we're offering them customer service. Then on the second page, as the buyer broker, up here, you're saying how you are representing the buyers. There are other areas for multiple representation, etc. We're going to have to do another session, I would think, on representation, because there's still a lot of confusion within the brokerage about agency and how we represent clients. But in a normal transaction, the cooperating brokerage represents the buyer and the listing brokerage represents the seller. When you're talking about commission, and this form is there to reflect how commission is paid, it is mainly there, though, to reflect agency. Commission was sort of put in here as an afterthought, I think. The cooperating brokerage commission, you put it in here when you are accepting what is in the MLS listing information. So you're either accepting A, MLS offering, or B, the cooperating brokerage will be paid as follows if it's something different than what's offered in the MLS listing. So you've got to fill them out. Again, you do not include HST. There's my little notes in there, because right down here, it says commission will be payable as described above, plus applicable taxes. If you do the math, 2.5% minus 1,000 plus HST is not the same as 2.5% plus HST minus 1,000. So if you're making any adjustments to the commission, please, please, please make sure there's no HST in there. It makes it a nightmare. What else can I tell you? Cooperating brokerage commission. When we are in multiple representation, there is no cooperating brokerage. We are the listing brokerage, and we also represent the buyer. So there is no cooperating brokerage commission. Our brokerage policy is that we take the commission and whatever is being offered in our MLS listing, that is what we give to our buyer agent, unless the buyers and sellers agents come to an agreement otherwise. So we would never say just because the listing was taken at 4.5% that we would only that we would split that 4.5% between the buyer's agent and the seller's agent. We will offer the 2.5% that we normally will in the listing agreement. So you don't have to worry about that if you are in multiple representation. Okay, we're going to move on to the agreement of purchase and sale. Couple of things that we're seeing is check the details. With AuthentiSign, details are being brought into the agreement of purchase and sale from the MLS listing. If that MLS listing has things that are incorrect, it will be transferred to your agreement. You are the agent, you're responsible for all of the information in there. It has to be correct. So please check it after that agreement of purchase and sale is prepared for you when you're working with the buyer, or when another brokerage or another agent is bringing you an offer on your property. Please check those details. On the first page of your agreement of purchase and sale, it says that the deposit is to be payable to the deposit holder by negotiable check. We do not accept uncertified checks, and our Schedule B says so. Our Schedule B overrides this. It has to be in the form of a certified check, bank draft, or now we're doing wire transfers. So please inform your buyers or your tenants that we do not accept checks that are not certified. When it outlines here that there are certain schedules attached to the agreement of purchase and sale, they have to be attached. Schedule B is not a separate form, even though we treat it as a separate form before it's attached to an agreement of purchase and sale. Oftentimes we get agreements, and as listing agents, it's up to you to make sure all of the schedules that are outlined on the first page are attached to the agreement of purchase and sale. As a buyer's agent, it's the same thing. Make sure that the Schedule B is the correct Schedule B. I just supervised offers last night, multiple offers, because the agent had their own offer. There were 3 offers on the table. An outside brokerage submitted an offer with a Schedule B. It was their own Schedule B, not ours. Make sure it's the correct one. Schedule B, we'll talk more about it when we get to it, okay? Alrighty. Notices. Right in the agreement of purchase and sale, when you are giving waivers or notices, it says that the agents are authorized to accept or give notices on behalf of their buyer or seller clients, except when we are in multiple representation. When we are multiple representation, the client actually has to receive and acknowledge that they've received the notice of fulfillment or waiver or whatever notice it is, okay? We are not allowed to receive notices on behalf of our clients when we're in multiple representation, and our front desk staff are never authorized to receive notices on behalf of our clients. They are not the agent, they are admin staff. Oftentimes, as managers, we'll be asked to acknowledge receipt of a notice or waiver, and I will do it, but I will only do it if I have an agreement of purchase and sale to compare it to. I need to make sure that the clause that is being waived or fulfilled is the same as what is in the agreement of purchase and sale before I sign off on it. Okay. Chattels included. ELFs and DWs are not words. When there is a dispute over ELFs or a DW, lawyers do not recognize those short forms. More and more, they're showing up here as well because this information is being brought out of the listing, the MLS listing. Please understand that the MLS listing is an advertising of the property. In there, from that information is where you are drawing up the legal contract. So when you are just bringing it in, ELFs, DWs, etc., are there because you don't have that much room to advertise in the MLS listing. But please, let's use our full words so that that isn't something that will give us grief in the future. Just a note, we are seeing many, many more furnace, central air, and hot water on demand rentals. Please be aware of those. The buyouts on those are huge, or the monthly fees are huge. Please pay attention to that. Okay, we have had a couple of instances where we get a firm offer and then on our listing, and then the buyer's agent will say a week later that they want to do a building inspection. And we say, no, that's not part of the offer. And they're saying, but number 13 in the agreement of purchase and sale says that we're allowed to. That's not what this says. This says that you were given the opportunity to inspect the property prior to acceptance of this offer. So the buyer acknowledges having had that opportunity and also to having had the opportunity to put in a building inspection clause. If that is not in the agreement of purchase and sale, they have waived their right to inspect the property. Okay, it's a firm deal. So that's just a note on an argument we had with an outside brokerage a couple of weeks ago. On a lot of the Schedule Bs, you'll see very long clauses trying to absolve the listing brokerage of all sorts of liability. In the agreement of purchase and sale itself, you already have an acknowledgement by the parties that any information provided by the brokerage is not legal advice, tax advice, or environmental advice. Agreement in writing. All agreements must be reduced to writing in the form of a contract. Please understand that even though RICO will take a look at text messages and understand there's an intent there, the courts don't. The courts want a written agreement within the four corners of our documents, okay? Outside emails, that sort of thing are great for backup, but they are not part of the contract. Our signature page. I don't know how many times I've seen this because it's nice and easy. We ask our buyers when they are signing the agreement of purchase and sale, when they're signing their offer, to please already sign the acknowledgement. That is not correct. That acknowledgement is there to say the parties are getting they are in receipt of an agreed to agreement. Do not pre-sign this. These are contracts, and in a dispute, RICO and lawyers target the details, and they will say to you, how is it the buyer acknowledges having gotten a copy of the agreement of purchase and sale a day before it was agreed to, a day before, when you go up here, the confirmation of acceptance was signed. Okay, you have to be careful with those details, and they're never a problem until it's a problem, and then people start reviewing it, and that's where our problems come from. Schedule A, this is where you put your clauses, and the way it is normally prepared is that you talk about the money first, you talk about the conditions in the offer, then you talk about your representations and warranties, and then you talk about your other stuff, such as surveys, visits to the property, leaving it in a clean and broom swept condition. This way, the listing agent sort of knows the flow of the document and where to look for certain things. Schedule B. Whether you're working for the buyer or the seller, it's up to you as the agent to ensure that it is completed. These are coming in, they're being pulled off MLS, and they are not being completed. For the most part, people will put in the buyer's name and the seller's name. Now with AuthentiSign, this is documenting itself a little more often, but as a separate document, it doesn't always populate. Make sure that everything in here is correct. The offer date, if you're working on the Schedule B as a separate document, sometimes it's dated incorrectly. It must refer to the original agreement of purchase and sale. and that date on the top of it, the day it was prepared and offered. Schedule B was originally prepared when brokerages were forced to disclose that buyers' deposits were being put into interest-bearing trust accounts. Prior to that, it wasn't supposed to go into an interest-bearing account, and there was never a necessity for Schedule B. But then RICO found out that everybody was putting them in interest-bearing accounts and said that interest belongs to the buyer and you have to disclose that to them. So each brokerage has set up their Schedule B to disclose how interest is paid out. The interest belongs to the buyer, but we do charge an administrative fee because to cut a check for $5 costs us more than the check. So this is where we disclose how we are paying out a buyer's interest. Let me see. And here, this is just, wait a minute, we'll get it there. Okay, on our Schedule B, we're showing where this overrides the front page where it said negotiable check, we're saying certified check or bank draft. Back here on our visits to view the property, we're talking about this is in addition to any appraisals or inspections, etc. So you get a couple more visits. Do not, on our Schedule B, we have it right in there. On other people's Schedule B, it isn't there, and they'll often put into their contract that they want 3 further inspections. These are not inspections, they're viewings. Be careful with that when you're taking a look at other offers coming in. We've had instances in the past where they use that word inspection to get further inspections if they halfway down the road they want to get out of the agreement of purchase and sale. They'll bring in a different building inspector, and that's not what this clause is for. It's for viewings, visits to the property. Read the Schedule B of other brokerages. They're getting quite creative with a lot of the nonsense that goes in there. Remember that this is a contract between the buyer and seller. We have no knowledge of what the other brokerage has told their client, whether they've explained agency or not. That's not our concern, and it shouldn't be in the agreement of purchase and sale between the buyer and the seller. Try not to duplicate clauses. That can always set up a conflict within the offer. So take a look at right here. For the purpose of this agreement, the terms banking, business, and working days, we've got a definition here. So when you've got an agreement coming in from another brokerage and they have a definition in their Schedule A, take a look at it, make sure it's exactly the same as ours, or remove that, that clause to make sure there is no ambiguity. Take out duplicate or irrelevant clauses. Make sure the correct Schedule B is attached.
And so what we're finding that a lot of brokerages are putting into Schedule B is that the brokerage reserves the right to hold the buyer's deposit if the deal falls apart for, I've seen as many as 15 business days and sometimes 10 business days, so that if your deal is going to fall apart and you guys are putting a mutual release forward to get your buyer's deposit back, the brokerage in Schedule B sometimes is now having 10 to 15 days before your buyer will get the deposit back. This is really important that your buyer understands that if this is their deposit and this falls apart, this deal falls apart, they may not have their deposit back in time to put in another offer. So you do want to make sure that you're reading your Schedule B very, very carefully and informing your buyer of a little detail like that could really mess things up if the deal doesn't work out. I just wanted to say that's something that we run into as a problem, Isabel, on a pretty regular basis, I think. Thank you.
Yes, and the reason for that is at one time, and I'm not sure if it's still happening, there were problems, even though it is a bank draft or certified check, getting it cleared by the bank, because at one point there was a little bit of fraud going on with bank drafts and certified checks. And so banks got extremely careful on how long they had as a clearing period for a bank draft. So that's why brokerages are doing it. For the most part, brokerages are pretty good at returning the funds as soon as possible. But also under COVID and so on, our business hours are not the same as they were. A lot of the administrators are working from home and not in the office on a daily basis. Checks and refunds are not being processed as quickly as they were. So that's another thing that's causing a problem with return of deposits. Not everybody is on top of it like we are, where we do it right away. Okay, so just be aware. Notice of fulfillment of conditions, and I used a notice, not a waiver here, and I'm sure we all know the difference. A notice of fulfillment of condition is when the action actually took place. So you went to the bank and you got your financing. You had a building inspection and you're fine. You're fulfilling that condition. A waiver is where you're just taking that clause right out of the agreement of purchase and sale as if it didn't belong there at all. So you put in a condition on financing, and the day after you did the offer, you won the lottery, so you don't need financing from the bank, so you can waive that condition. Receipt acknowledged of a notice of fulfillment or a waiver, it has to be done by either the agent or by the client themselves if we're in multiple representation. This is not something that's done by the front desk. One of the managers can, on occasion, acknowledge receipt, but not without a copy of the actual agreement of purchase and sale in hand, so that we know the proper clause is being fulfilled or waived. Having said that, I really don't like doing those because we don't know what's going on behind the scenes, and we don't know if any other documents are necessary there. Or even for that matter, whether it's being done in a proper timeline, because oftentimes you have a condition in an agreement of purchase and sale that is changed by amendment, and whoever prepares the notice of fulfillment doesn't read it quite closely enough, and the original clause is waived, and what you have is an amendment out there waving in the wind with a new conditional date that is not being waived or fulfilled. So always follow the whole process through yourselves whenever possible. Mutual releases. I see John is there with us. Mutual releases are a bane of managers' existence because many agents do not do these properly, do they, John?
Oh, it's amazing well, I'll just let you go on this side because we see everything wrong on these, don't we, Isabel?
We do. Okay. So when you are doing a mutual release, especially if you're doing it for me, and especially if I have to give back money, it has to be done correctly. So either do it correctly, or when you receive it from another agent, read every word and make sure it's done correctly. So the buyers and sellers are usually in the correct places, but the brokerages often aren't. Make sure the listing brokerage is on the listing side, the cooperating brokerage is on the cooperating side. Make sure they're not exchanged. Make sure both brokerages are there, because this agreement not only releases the clients, but it releases the brokerages from liability. Okay, so make sure that that's in the correct place and that it is there. Fill out fill out the agreement of purchase and sale details. Okay, so you need the address there, you need the date of the agreement of purchase and sale. Now we get into the good stuff. The amounts here need to, especially in our case where we are giving back a deposit, the amounts have to match what's going on in our trust account. So if the amount of deposit was never received by us, make sure it says that. It says either the amount in words and numbers and make sure they match, or it says 0, that we didn't receive the deposit. Payable to. Make sure that it is payable to whoever you wish it to be payable to, but if it's to 2 people, make sure they have a joint bank account, because oftentimes the banks will not cash it and we have to cancel it out and start over again. Say who it is payable to, not just payable to buyer, not just payable to seller. Put in a name. Okay. Irrevocable buy. I'm not real clear why this mutual release has an irrevocable time on it. This is something relatively new. I know there's a good reason, but I don't know what it is. I often advise our agents to put in a long time for people to get the mutual release signed, because oftentimes you can't get it immediately signed. John, do you have any input on that?
If people ask me, I'm telling people to put in a 5-day irrevocable. So
Okay.
because then not only does it have a chance for the buyer and seller to sign, but it also gives an opportunity for the listing brokerage and the cooperating brokerage managers to sign as well.
Perfect.
As you and I both know, up to 5-6 years ago, there was no irrevocable on these things. And
exactly.
I don't understand why either, Isabel.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So as a cooperating or buyer's agent, you fill out the mutual release. You're asking for the deposit back. It's going to be prepared to go back to one of your buyers. You can submit that mutual release, if we are the cooperating brokerage, to your manager for signature with just the buyer's signature on it. If, however, we are in multiple representation, I want everybody's signatures on it before we sign it anywhere. And if we are the listing brokerage, I need to see both the buyers and the sellers' signatures on there to show that they are in agreement to sign this mutual release before we release deposits. So that is sort of the only time we will pre-sign as the cooperating brokerage, is if we're not giving money back on the mutual release. Otherwise, I want everybody's signatures on there. Okay. All righty. So that's kind of the real estate transaction. I was just going to again highlight some COVID clauses, and I will just say to you that COVID clauses are there. They were prepared by OREA, and lawyers are losing their minds on them. Lawyers know what to do if the property doesn't close due to COVID. They know the amounts of time they need to extend if land registry were ever to close or the banks closed. That did not happen. However, most of these clauses are innocuous except for one. So we'll just quickly go through some of them. So if you see them in your offers coming to you or you're using some of them, that's fine. There's only one that I caution you very strongly never to use. The key drop devices are fine because until we went into COVID, lawyers physically handed over keys to buyers. Now it's done through lockbox. That's not a problem. Electronic signatures, oops, here we go, hold on. Electronic signatures, you can use that clause, okay, and it gives everybody permission to use electronic signatures on closing documents. Video conferencing. You can use this, but the lawyers laugh at this because they've already figured out how to do video closings. They have their permission from the government to do it, and they are doing it. They don't need our clause in there to have that happen. Okay. Condition on buyer viewing the property. This is when we were first in COVID, and if we ever go into a major lockdown again, where buyers are viewing the property through virtual tours and that sort of thing, this is a condition upon the buyer having an offer accepted, but the offer is conditional on the buyer viewing the property and deciding to move forward with it. Okay, that way people did not have a lot of buyers coming through the property, only the people that were very serious and were prepared to negotiate an offer before they access the property. This one that I put on alert, state of emergency 1, unable to complete. Do not allow this clause in your offers. And the reason is our job as agents is to prepare contracts that are going to close. We do not put an escape clause in here. And that's exactly what's in here. If there are certain things that happen, either party may terminate this agreement upon notice in writing to the other party or their lawyers. This isn't the way real estate works. Do not use this clause. And it's called State of Emergency 1. And the only reason I'm including it in here is because it is available in the OREA clauses. And further to that, just understand that I know that that is a long clause and that it takes some reading. But if you don't read the clause, you don't know what's in there. Read your clauses, make sure there's nothing unusual in any of the clauses, because I will tell you that we have found instances where people have taken a normal OREA clause and they have changed it. So read it, make sure you understand what is in a clause. Balance by wire transfer. This is acceptable in a buyer or seller's offer, but it must replace deposit pay 02, and it's not necessary to put it in there. The lawyers have figured out how to transfer money without a problem. Delay closing upon a services reopening. Again, it's fine in there, but the lawyers know what to do if COVID impacts a closing. Delay closing upon services reopening. I like this clause because if anything should happen that the actual physical closing and registration is delayed, as long as funds are in place in the seller's lawyer's trust account, not to be released until the property closes, the buyer can have access to the property. So what this does is, even if something horrible were to happen where land registry or the bank's closed, your buyer is not out on the street. The seller knows he's moving forward and that his funds are protected in a trust account until the property closes. Okay, so that's a little bit about clauses. Fintrac. Fintrac is the bane of our existence because the government loves forms. And what used to be, first of all, when I started in real estate, we didn't have to do Fintrac. We would identify our clients, but it wasn't something that we had to do. We didn't used to have to do this. Then when we had to start doing personal identifications for Fintrac, it was a one-page form. It was nice and easy, and off we went. Well, a couple of years ago, it became a 4-page form, and it has to be filled out, and it has to be filled out properly. We've gone a step above in that we took the forms, and in great big red and blue letters, we've given you directions on how to fill these out. When in doubt, Peter Holgate is now our Fintrac officer. He is the manager of the Hamilton office, and you can reach out to him if you have questions. If it is something tricky, he can find out the answer for you. However, all of our front desks and our Google Drive have these forms in there with nice big red letters on how to fill it out. We do our best trying to walk you through this stuff. So on the individual identification form, the top part always has to be filled out, and this is all about the transaction property address and who is taking the information, being you. Verification of the individual must always be filled out right up here. Then you move out to how did you get that information. So you got it through A1, and if you can't get it in A1, then you move down to A2 or A3, okay? And A1 is the one that is typically filled out, otherwise you start getting a little bit more involved. Second page, if I can get this scrolling. Okay, this is about how you found out who's involved in the transaction. So an unrepresented individual must always be filled out when you're working with a mere posting, because we are not agent for that seller. However, oftentimes a seller will not give you the information. So then you fill out this part of it where they're refusing to give you information. Verification of third parties. You always have to fill out either B1 or B2. So B1 says third parties. You filled this out when there is no third party. And the way you find out there's no third party is you ask. So that's fairly easy. If there is a third party, in other words, if you're dealing with a power of attorney or an estate trustee or something like that, this is where you fill it out. And here we go into client risk. And you're describing what you consider the risk to be in this client. You must give an explanation of why you picked the risk type. And I will tell you, that in most cases, we have low-risk clients. If anything comes across your radar that is a little bit more than a low risk, you must immediately let your manager know, and we will assess whether it's got to go to our Fintrac officer and whether or not we have to report this transaction. I will tell you that we are due probably fairly soon for a Fintrac audit. We've never had one yet. It will be very exciting when we do have one, because Fintrac is saying that the brokerages are not reporting enough high and medium risk people. So we'll let you know how it goes. However, put in your explanations and it shouldn't be a problem. Last page, this is about our business relationship, and our policy is to fill this section out with each client, no matter if a business relationship exists or not. This way we're covered and you're covered. So in here, measures taken to monitor the business relationship and keep client information up to date. You must fill out this section stating that the info was verified through an example of a driver's license, and that all the information is the same as the original information. Okay, again, anything other than that, speak to your manager. Receipt of funds. There's another goodie. All righty. So your basic transaction information must always be filled out. Information of funds must always be filled out. In here, we do not accept cash as an option, so that's fine. And let me see. What else can I tell you about this? Additional information must be filled out if you accept the form of payment as a check or money order. You must provide account number from where the funds are coming from. On a check, it will show. On a money order, it will show. On a, sorry, I'm getting a blank here. On a bank draft, it will not show. So on a bank draft, you will ask, and if they give you the information of the account it's coming from, great. If not, you're going to say that you did not get the information and why. Okay, so that's it, everyone. If anyone has questions, please understand that that's what we are here for. We love answering your questions. And certainly drop me a line anytime with any of your questions. I can't guarantee I will drop everything and get back to you immediately, but I love being a smarty pants, and I will answer your questions anytime I can. So thanks very much for your attention. Great session. Thank you.